Do you know that smell of stored thing? Old paper, a perfume that was behind, the smell of a lifetime. That was the smell of the memories box that my mother left for me. In the middle of the pain of mourning, moving that things was my only comfort. And inside, leather-led, and with her initials, was her diary. My first thought was to keep it like a sacred relic. One last piece of it the world didn't need to see. But something called me, a force, an instinct. A last act of love for my mother, or perhaps the time bomb she left programmed to blow up my lap and save me. I had the life that everyone asks God. A 10-year wedding with Ricardo, a man I thought was amazing. My company thrives, and my sister Carol, as my best friend and right-hand man. A true margarine commercial. Little did I know that on those pages my mother had not written just memories. She had written my sentence, and proof that the devil does not wear a Prada. Sometimes he sleeps in his bed and calls you sister in law. What would you do in my place? Comments down here and already subscribes to the channel so as not to lose the unfolding of this story. I spent the first pages with almost childish reverence. I read about my childhood, about my mother's dreams. It was a balm until I arrived close to the end. Her handwriting, always so elegant and fluid, has changed. She was trembling, hurriedly, as if she fight against time or her own hand to write. And then, I saw. It was one of the last notes, dated a few months before it departed. The pen ink was different, a blood red that stained the paper in my eyes. The phrase was short, but carried the weight of an avalanche. I suspect Carol and Ricardo, there is something about him, whispers when I arrive. God forgive me if it's crazy, but I feel that I need to protect my daughter's marriage. I read 1, 2, 10 times. The air disappeared from my lungs. Craziness? My mother was never crazy. She was the most perceptive person I met. That was not a delirium of a sick woman. It was a warning, a scream of posthumous help. Not for her, but to me. That diary, my comfort, had just turned into a gun pointed at my chest. The first reaction is denial, right? That treacherous voice in your head that tries to protect you from pain. She was confused by the medicines. She always had a silly jealousy of Ricardo. Carol is my sister, she would never do that. I wanted to believe these lies. I clung to them with the strength of a castaway. I tried to close the diary and forget, but the seed of distrust, once planted by someone you trusted so much, does not die. It creates poisonous roots. Every gesture of Ricardo in the following days seemed false. Each late call from my sister sounded like a lame excuse. Paranoia started to consume me. The morning gave way to a cold, calculating anger. If my mother was wrong, I needed to prove it. But what if she were right? I remembered the safe, Ricardo's safe in our office. He always said it was for important documents from the company and our future. A future that suddenly looked like a mirage. The perfect excuse. If there was a dirty secret, a trail of lie, he would be there, locked in 7 keys. And I knew exactly where he kept the damn master key. Waiting for him to sleep was the hardest part. Every breath beside me was torture. It looked like I was lying next to a stranger, an enemy. When the silence of the dawn finally swallowed the house, I got up, barefoot, not to make noise. I went to the office. My heart beat in my throat. The key was where I suspected. Inside a fake book on the shelf, one of those of author he pretended to read to look smarter. My hands trembled so much that I could hardly fit the key to the safe lock. The click of the door opening sounded like a shot in the silence. Inside, the usual. Passports, scriptures, a few dollars. But deep down there was a document folder I had never seen. And when I caught her, the final blow even before opening it, an unmistakable smell. It was her perfume, the expensive and sweet perfume Carol used as if it were her second skin. That smell, which once remembered me sister's hugs and confidences, now caused me nausea. The test was there, impregnated on paper, even before my eyes could confirm. With hands still impregnated with her perfume, I opened the paste, and the world collapsed. It was not a love letter. It was not a compromising photo. It was much worse, much more calculated. It was a contract for the purchase and sale of a property, a luxurious apartment in a noble neighborhood, a place I didn't even know existed. I read the clauses with the blurred vision, the name of the buyer, the seller, until I arrived in the part that mattered. Promising buyer, Carolina, her last name, my sister, her name was there, printed in black and white, like the owner of a secret apartment. The air lacked me, That was not a slip, a case of one night. That was a plan, a double life, an investment, a structure mounted on my back. And who paid for all that? Who was the generous benefactor behind my little sister's new luxury life? I didn't need to read the rest of the contract to know. Ricardo's name didn't need to be there. That apartment was her silence price, the price of her loyalty to him, not me. It was the monument of their betrayal. Nausea became fury. I searched the rest of the documents in the folder as an injured animal, and there were the extracts, copies of the transfer vouchers, and each of them was a punch in my stomach. The transfers came straight from the account of our company, the company I erected with my sweat, with nights in course, with my father's inheritance money. The money that was supposed to be our future, our security, was paying for their love nest. Each portion of the apartment, each condominium, every fee, all paid with my work. I was not just the betrayed wife, I was their Safadea's financier. He not only betrayed me, he stole me. And she, my sister, was not just the lover. It was complicit, a thief that smiled at me at Sunday lunch while enjoying the money that came out of my pocket. The humiliation was the worst part, feeling an idiot, the sucker wife and sister who paid the bills as they laughed at me in the back. At that moment, sadness died and gave way to a desire for revenge as cold and sharp as steel. I could have made a scandal right there. I could have woke up Ricardo with the contract in his face. But for what? For him to lie? To say it was an investment? For Carol? For her to cry crocodile tears and say it was a mistake? No, I didn't want the show. I didn't want excuses. I wanted the truth, all of it, no matter how disgusting it was. I needed irrefutable proofs of those that leave no room for lies. The next day, with my eyes inced but with a determination of iron, I searched the internet. Private detective. I found one with good references. A discreet former policeman. I made a date in an anonymous coffee. I handed him the address of the apartment and the photos of Ricardo and Carol. My voice came out firm, without emotion. I want to know everything. Routine, encounters, who goes to this place. I want photos, videos, reports. Don't save me anything. And by saying that, I felt like I'm signing the death certificate of my old life. I wasn't paying for him to find a secret. I was paying him to officially destroy any drop of hope that still remains in me. The wait was hell. Each day was an agony. I kept living in the automatic. Good morning kisses at Ricardo, phone calls for Carol. And with each interaction, my disgust only increased. I became an actress, and the falsity Oscar was mine. A week later, the detective called. The material is ready. My stomach froze. I took the brown envelope with him in the same coffee. It was thick, heavy lies. I went to my car and, with trembling hands, opened. The first photos were what I expected. Ricardo and Carol arriving at the building holding hands. Kisses. At the door of the apartment. Scenes from them on the porch, laughing, embraced like a happy couple. Each photo was a stab, but a stab I already expected. The pain was familiar. I kept passing the photos one by one with a feeling of empty, until I arrived at the last one, and that's when the floor really opened. It wasn't just about them. There was someone else in the photo, a third element that transformed betrayal into something monstrous, unforgivable. A little face I had never seen but sealed the fate of us all. In the photo, Carol held a little boy on her lap, a little boy of maybe a couple of years, and Ricardo was beside her, his hand on the child's head, smiling, the same smile he gave me every morning. It was not a nephew. It was not the son of a friend. Intimacy, familiarity in the scene was undeniable. The detective report was brutally clear and detailed. The boy's name was Lucas. He was 2.5 years old. And the detective, going beyond what I asked, had got a copy of the birth certificate. Father, Ricardo, his surname. Mother, Carolina, her last name. They didn't just have one case. They didn't just have an apartment. They had a family, a secret family, hidden in a neighboring city, where Carol was taking him on the weekends when she said she was visiting friends. Mathematics was cruel. 2.5 years. Their case was not recent. It was old, deep. They built a lifetime as I built a company for us. I was not just betrayed. I was erased, replaced, and the living proof of my replacement was there, smiling in that picture. That boy was not to blame for anything, but he was the symbol of every lie they told. At that moment, in the car, holding those tests, I felt the pain of mourning because my mother comes back with overwhelming strength. But it was different. Now I was mourning for two losses. I lost my mother, my pillar, and at the same moment, I lost my marriage, my sister, my family, the life I believed to have. It was a double mourning, an echo of pain that made me completely hollow. Everything around me looked like a movie, and I was just a spectator. The sadness was so deep, so heavy that the anger disappeared. Only one emptiness remained. I remembered my mother's words in the diary and cried. I cried for her pain when writing it, because she died carrying this suspicion. I cried for myself, the idiot I went for so long. I cried for the betrayal of my own sister, the person I helped, which I loved unconditionally. And I cried for the end of everything. The love I felt for Ricardo turned dust into ashes. There was nothing more to save. There was nothing more to forgive. There was only the need to end it, once for all. And suddenly, in the middle of that ocean of pain, a clear idea as crystal came about. My mother's seventh-day mass approached. The family would be all there, the friends, and of course both, the perfect couple, in mourning, supporting the poor widow and the desolate sister. The hypocrisy, their image, pretending sadness for the death of the woman whose last wish was to warn me about them, rolled my stomach. And that's when clarity came. What would be the most poetic and devastating stage for the truth to come to light? That one. The funeral. A place of respect, memory, pain. It would be my final act of respect for my mother. It would be the way to give voice to your last alert. I wouldn't do that out of revenge. I mean, not only for revenge, I would do it for her memory. So that the last word was hers. So that her truth was heard by all who loved her. And for their lie to be exposed in the most sacred and public place possible. The idea gave me a strength that I had not felt for days. Sadness gave way to a cold determination. I prepared my speech. I separated the page from the diary. I kept the key to the apartment. The show was about to start. The church was full. The smell of incense and flowers suffocated me. Ricardo was by my side, his hand on my shoulder, a gesture that now burned my skin. Carol was in the first row, her eyes red, the embodiment of false pain. The priest finished the ceremony and made room for those who wanted to pay one last tribute. It was my cue. I took a deep breath, got up and walked to the pulpit. All the eyes turned to me. Ricardo looked at me confused. I ignored him. I put my glasses, opened my mother's diary on the scheduled page, and leaned into the microphone. I would like to read one of the last things my mother wrote, I started, and my voice came out firm, clear without a shredding. She was worried about the future, what she left behind. I read some beautiful phrases about family and legacy to calm everyone. And then, I took a dramatic break. I looked directly at Ricardo, and then to Carol. But her biggest concern in her last days was about my marriage, and about loyalty. And then, with the embargoed voice of a contained fury, I read the phrase in red paint, aloud, for everyone to hear. I suspect Carol and Ricardo. Protect your marriage. The phrase echoed through the church, a shocked murmur toward the congregation. I saw Ricardo's face white as a paper. Carol froze. Her jaw dropped. I didn't stop. My mother was a wise woman, and she was right, but she didn't know everything. I closed the diary. I took the apartment key out of my pocket. She didn't know, for example, from the apartment you, Ricardo, bought my sister with our company money. The silence that followed was absolute, so heavy that it seemed to have a physical form. No one breathed. I went down the pulpit, walked slowly to the first row, and stopped in front of my sister. She stared at me, the dried crocodile tears on her face. Without saying a word, I opened my hand and let the apartment key fall. The metallic sound of the key hitting the church's marble was the only thing that was heard. A small sound, but meant the end of everything. The sound of the truth. I didn't wait for the reaction. I didn't wait for the screams, the excuses, the questions. As the chaos began to explode behind me, with uncles and cousins turning to both of them, I just turned around and walked out of the church. I left that suffocating environment and breathed the air from the street as if it were the first time. The pain was still there, but now she had a mate. The liberation. I didn't go home. I went straight to the lawyer's office that I had already contacted. The grief was over. Revenge was just starting. I sat in front of it and put everything on the table. The diary, the contract, the bank statements, the detective report, the birth certificate. I want divorce, I said, with a calm voice. And I want to sue the two for diversion of resources, misappropriation, everything I are entitled to. I want my company back, the part that is mine, and the part he stole from me to build his lie. The lawyer looked at the mountain of tests and gave me a contained smile. This is not a divorce process, she said. This is a demolition, and we have the tractor and the plant. The process was brutal, but fast. With the tests I had, they had no chance. Ricardo lost any right to the company and was still sentenced to reimburse every penny diverted. Carol, my former sister, was an accomplice of a crime and with a destroyed reputation. I took the full control of the company that I helped build. The first months were difficult. I had to rebuild not only a business but myself. There were days of crying, solitude, of anger. But with every balance I closed in blue. With every new contract I signed, I felt a piece of my strength coming back. I found that I was much stronger than the woman they tried to destroy, and I realized that my story, however painful, was not unique. Many women go through financial and emotional betrayals and feel alone and with no way out. That's why I created the project Remedied, a space to offer legal, psychological, and financial support for women who have gone through situations like mine. I made my greatest pain into my greatest mission. Today, I'm no longer the victim of that story. I am the author of my own life. And if you are going through something similar, know you are not alone, and your revenge can be your happiness.